Welcome to the podcast Life After Addiction and Indictment. I'm your host, Steve Cloward, and I spent most of the last decade and well over $100,000 on coaches, consultants, masterminds, and events trying to figure out how to reclaim my life again. On this podcast, I'm going to share the tools, the tips, the tricks, and the hacks that allowed me to forgive myself so that I could reclaim my life again. I'll be interviewing experts in mindset, leadership, entrepreneurship, sales, marketing, branding, and so much more. I'm glad you're here. Sit back and relax and enjoy the show.
Let's go! This is Life After Addiction and Indictment.
Welcome back to Life After Addiction and Indictment. Today, I've got a gentleman on the show that I'm excited to talk to, learn more about his story. And I want to welcome to the show today, 𝗬𝗪 Malone. How you doing, 𝗬𝗪?
I'm doing great. Doing great today, Steve. How are you today, man?
I'm doing really well, thanks.
Awesome.
Hey, man, let's talk a little bit about kind of how you grew up and, you ended up going into the military, and let's maybe start kind of, how you grew up, what your life was like, and then, what was it that, was it you always looking to join the military, or was there something that, had you decide that you wanted to go in the military? Take us, from kind of your childhood up to that point.
Yeah, so I was raised in the southwest side of Chicago, so right on the cusp of the city limit where the forest begins. It's a really nice, quaint little town, very boring, but it was actually founded by the Italian mob, and it was run by the Italian mob, and all of our police chiefs, all of our mayors actually up till 1992 were appointed by the mafia. There's a book out there called Double Deal by our former police chief, who was arrested for accessory to homicide for the Cook County prosecutor's wife, who was a dean at the local university. It's just a really crazy, quiet town, but I feel like it was made that way on purpose.
Yeah.
It's like a choke point for the city. You got Archer Avenue, I-55, 294, all these major roadways go right through there. And so it also kind of serves as like a really big drug kind of like a distribution point.
Yeah.
And so growing up there, had some really tight friends. Half the kids kind of went to the city side and joined these gangs. And then
Is that city considered the South Side?
Yeah, not the true South Side, not like the Wild Hundreds or all that, but close enough to where you can get in some pretty serious trouble if you went looking for it.
I wasn't even aware really that when I was in prison, there was one guy from there, and he went by his name. The name he went by was South Side. That's why.
Yeah, there's some friends of mine that like say I'm South Side or I'm from the South Side of all that, but I kind of always really just consider it like the Southwest. To me, there's just like a delineation. Especially after having made many drug runs over to like the Stony Island area. I mean, it's like, to me, it's like, that's the South Side. Where I grew up wasn't necessarily that.
A quiet little town. It's probably not considered in that.
Right, exactly. But right on the cusp, like you go 5 minutes in one direction, you go east and boom, you're entering the fringe of it all. And so it was cool. We got in a lot of adventure. I always had like an adventurous knack. I think my mom really instilled that in me as an early age. She was raised on a farm up in Michigan, like straight up cattle farm, survived off of what they grew, and left home at an early age to start a life of her own. My dad was always raised in the city. My grandfather was a Chicago firefighter for 33 years. So really two opposite ends of the spectrum. And my dad's always been really risk adverse. He's worked for the government, FDIC, like accounting most of his life, the majority of his life now. And so I had those two paradigms, like adventurous and kind of explore things, and then really safe and secured and, don't take too many risks. And I think that my mom instilling the little bit of adventure in me is what pushed me to go and hang out with the people that I did hang out with. And then my dad trying to kind of control me, I guess, with his risk adverse, lifestyle kind of propelled me even further.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want, to be bogged down by that. And so it was a pretty good childhood for the most part. Had food on the table, had clothes on the back. And then as I entered into my teenage years, I just kind of started hanging around the wrong groups of people, really, really bad, older people, influential people in my life who kind of warped my perception on what cool is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I started getting into some of the hard stuff.
So started messing around with drugs and things like that.
Yeah, at a really, really early age, man. I was 16 the first time I tried heroin. I, snorted it. I still remember to this day. I remember just like yesterday, the first time that I had ever been introduced to it. And I was always a big Nirvana fan and Kurt Cobain and the heroin use, right? So I always like knew about it. And I was smoking weed when I was like 12 years old. I was actually just thinking about this yesterday, how wild it is to think I was leaving elementary school to go to my friend's house. Like, yeah, just so it's just kind of like disgusting to look back at it. 12-year-old, but
crazy. We have a society that actually happens, to be honest, just 12 is so young.
It is. And I have no idea like where we even got off thinking that was like okay to do. But so at 16, though, I still remember the first trip downtown. I drove a guy. I didn't have a license because I never got my license till I was 18. I took a friend's car and I drove him downtown to the west side of Chicago to go get some weed. We're driving around. Literally, a shooting took place as I'm driving down the street. I watched it. I was like, man, this is like wild. All I could think about was what I'm going to tell Vicky if her car gets like totaled, the friend whose car I took. I told her I was going to the store or something. And this guy gets back in the car, my buddy Dwayne. He was an older dude. He was actually a really good guy, believe it or not. As people might get a warped perception of this guy, dude. Dwayne, he's like 45, 50 years old, hanging out with 16-year-old. But he was a really good dude. He looked out for me a lot. And even though he kind of introduced me to this stuff, he actually really did care about me a lot. He, without going too far down that rabbit hole, he didn't get me addicted to the substance. He got me introduced to it, but he actually purposefully withheld the substance from me. So I would go through withdrawals and not become overwhelmingly physically dependent upon it. It was some other friends of mine who were getting into it at the same time that actually ended up doing that. But yeah, I still remember it. Said, hey, I didn't come down here for weed. I came down here for some dope. It's the etiquette that I give you a little bit because you drove me. And I was like, yeah, sure, man, I'll try it out. And, it felt good at the time. Looking back at it though, makes me pretty sick. And the way I got into the military was my best friend, John. He joined in 2005. Iraq war was pretty big. A lot of people were dying. And he never got into the hard stuff with me. John and I did everything together. He just never really got into the heroin, the coke, the crack, the other stuff.
Did you end up, were you consistently using heroin? Did you get to the point you were addicted to it, or?
Oh yeah. It got pretty nasty, man. Like I remember my mom found 10 bags of dope that I had hidden. I don't even know how the hell she found it. She was always breaking through my stuff and kind of, I guess,
intuition just leads them to it somehow.
Dude, it was unbelievable, man. I remember I got home from school to go get my bags out, and then they weren't there. And it was in the most secretive spot ever. Like I was like, there's no way I misplaced this. Yeah. And man, I started hitting withdrawals really hard. I was snorting it multiple times a day at this point throughout my days. And shortly thereafter is when I got involved with another group of friends of mine who were shooting it up regularly right down the road. And that's when I started shooting it up a couple of times. I've only shot it up a handful of times, maybe like 10, 15, 20 times. But anybody who's ever done that before knows that it's like going from the minor leagues to the major leagues in terms of the feeling and the withdrawal symptoms and just the how violent it becomes.
Yeah.
So John never got into that stuff. He always admitted that he had a super addictive personality and he didn't have any interest in it. And he joined the Marine Corps. And then in 2005, when I went out to his Marine Corps boot camp graduation, because I spent a lot of time with his family, lived with them for a little bit. When I went out there, I saw my best friend, and just how different he was in every way, in every capacity. And I just knew that I had to make a change. And so I had already been attempting to quit, substances. I was like dwindling myself down at this point.
Yep.
But when I saw him, man, I was like, I'm joining the Marines. And I turned to his brother, handed him 2 fresh packs of smokes. And I said, I'm done. And I quit everything that day.
That's powerful.
And got back to Chicago, and I was not in good condition for probably like 2 months, to be honest. I had like some days, but There's probably like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 months where I was just like physically just not capable of doing much. And yeah, it was, but you know what? A year later, man, I shipped off and I went to boot camp.
Wow, that's amazing. Jeez. I mean, yeah, most people aren't that fortunate, you know.
No,
It's obvious that you guys did have a great relationship, but that impact, you know, that seeing him had on you. I mean, geez, thank the good Lord for that, huh?
yeah, you know, it's you know, it's not like hard for me to talk about, but it'll, I don't think it'll ever not be an emotional thing for me.
Oh yeah, I have the same feeling, man. It's hard for me to talk about certain situations and things that I dealt with without getting very emotional. Because I mean, there's times I used to, you know, drive to work just bawling. You know, it's like I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, dancing with that devil is just something I didn't wish on even an enemy. You know.
Yeah, I mean,
the only way to
like,
like.
Yeah, you know, it's the only way to solve it is to do more of it. And then that just drives you further down into the hole. You know, you got to break past that barrier,
Exactly.
which, you know, anybody, I still wholeheartedly believe anybody can do, regardless of what you hear in the media, regardless of what you hear the doctors say. Honestly, if you are addicted to a substance, I have complete and full faith that anybody can overcome that.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I don't think it's spoken of like that enough in our modern society. I think they're always saying, oh, you're always going to be a victim, you're always going to be addicted. And I don't really know your philosophy on all that stuff, but man, if somebody out there, what's that?
I right there with yours. I don't even believe in saying, you know, I'm a recovering addict.
Me neither, man.
That's like giving yourself, it's leaving an opening for a relapse. I just don't believe in that. Why? I mean, we know the power of the mind, we know the power of words. So why would you even entertain that, you know?
100%, man. And when you look at the way that the brain is constructed neurologically, when you develop new behavioral patterns, you're creating new physical pathways in the brain. So therefore, you are literally becoming a new physical specimen of a human being.
100%.
And if you keep saying it like you're talking about, you're still sending neurons down those old pathways saying, hey, I'm still here. I'm still here. Dude, I say, fuck that. Sorry, I don't know if I'm supposed to swear or not, but
dude, just be you. That's how we do it here.
Yeah, cool.
100%. And yeah, to me, that's something I've always struggled with. And I don't think people understand, you know, the vulnerability, just that crack that they're, you know, leaving open that can create all sorts of problems.
It does. It absolutely does. And this is a huge thing. Like anybody who I'm like, whenever I'm doing like my coaching programs or whenever I'm working with a client, you know, I say the way that you talk to yourself, that the words that you say, it has incredible power. Yep. It can literally be the difference between you being successful in life or you being in the same place that you've always been in your life. So words absolutely do matter, man. Absolutely.
I love that, because that's you know, that's really what kind of flipped my script. I mean, you know, after what I went through and, you know, crashed and burned, I went to prison and stuff. And you know, I stayed basically a victim for about 8 years after I got out of prison, simply because of the way I was thinking. And until I was, you know, realized that and understood that, and I literally put some things into practice to literally rewire my mind, to literally, you know, say certain things every single day to put out a different message. Yep. You know, that stuff, I mean, you know, I'd learned a lot about it a couple of decades ago, you know, but until you've done it and you can see that stuff really does have power and things can totally change within 2 years. Everything that I was speaking had manifested in my life, other than a couple of things, you know, which those took place as well. It's just, it's incredibly powerful. And, you know, for anybody out there struggling, you know, that's the thing you really got to look at is, how are you thinking? You know, what are you telling yourself? What are you believing? You know, and what are those thoughts you're grabbing onto that you're continuing to build stories on top of that's taking you in the wrong direction? All you just need to realize that and just take control and start telling yourself a different story. Because everybody, like you said, anybody can get sober. It doesn't mean it's easy. We don't know, you know, everybody's situation, but if you understand the reason, and there's all different reasons, some can be as just simply for recreation, but they got physically addicted. But I believe as most people, there is an underlying issue, and that underlying issue is the key to solving the issue, you know, long term, because you can get sober, but if you don't take care of what's really causing you to use, what is it that you're trying to numb yourself from or deal with, if you can understand that, then, work on that, then you can definitely solve the drug issue or alcohol issue or sex issue or porn issue or whatever issue, eating issue.
Dude, what's kind of interesting is something that I've learned over the years, and this just comes from the many transformations that I've made in my life, from different personality types into the man that I currently am now, is that I'm finding consistency, that it's just this abundance of time and energy. And like when you have a lot of energy and you're not properly expending that energy in a constructive format, whether it be working out or doing something with your hands or artisanship, craftsmanship, art, being with the family, or providing servitude to your community, then you start to get all this energy built up inside of you, which then therefore starts to create a lot of the anxiety, because your mind starts basically going on this overdrive. And when your mind is going on this overdrive, and then you start to try to project things into the future with a negatively defaulted system of belief, because our brain is survival based. So all of our thoughts are going to be immediately negatively founded in a negative context, because the brain wants to survive and conserve energy. And so it's always thinking these negative things. And then we just compound that now with thinking about the past. And then we start to think about the things that bring us problems. And what I've noticed is, like, when you have to survive, like in some of these nations that I've been to and the people that I've worked with, they don't have depression, and then in the middle ones, like the ones like, let's say like Kenya, for example, in Nairobi, they have a massive alcohol problem. Like, people are dying on the streets daily from this like tainted booze that they drink. It's like toilet hooch, but like massively produced on the streets.
Course creators, say goodbye to intimidating software and eliminate multiple subscriptions, and say hello to Backbone. Backbone helps course creators thrive with their all-in-one, easy-to-use sales and marketing platform. Backbone gives you all your automation in one place to capture, nurture, and turn more leads into customers. With Backbone, you get unlimited courses, membership sites, funnels, landing pages, surveys, and forms with our easy-to-use drag-and-drop features. That's not all. Backbone provides a full CRM and pipeline management, two-way SMS, workflow automations, call tracking, full analytics, built-in AI, 24/7 support, and so much more. Stop paying for multiple tools and put more money in your pocket with Backbone. Just go to backbonelms.io now to get your free 14-day trial. Backbone supports letthemlive.org to help defend the defenseless by donating 5% of each subscription every month. Jump over to backbonelms.io now to start your free trial today.
And it's like, okay, cool. So you go out to the countryside, they don't have that. Then you go into Nairobi and they have this issue. Why? Because these people are living softer lives and lives where they're capable of thinking and letting their mind and their energies run wild. So just a really interesting observation that I made. And then when I look at the transformations I've made in my life, dude, like from a teen druggy punk into a basically trained Marine, what did I do? I started working out and channeling that energy in a very specific way. When I was leaving the military and I was drunk and homeless all the time and suicidal, I wasn't working out. And then the moment that I started to channel that energy and to work out, I started to elevate myself, my frequency, my feelings. And dude, it's like a thing of the past now. So just an interesting observation that I've made for the viewers.
That's awesome. I love that you say frequency. Talked a lot about that on past shows, and just how it seems like that's coming more to the consciousness of more mainstream, if you will, that we are just energy, and it's that frequency, that vibration we put out is what really can dictate our entire life, and the situation we're in. If you're, the things that you were thinking of and doing when you were dealing with your drugs, the same with me. I mean, we kept attracting people and things and situations, that enhanced and continue to take us down that road. This frequency now that you're putting out with what you're doing, obviously, is totally different. And it's just amazing how crazy people that haven't ever experienced this or even really been exposed to it or thought much about it, but when you have, and then you can really look at your life and just see, I mean, I had a situation last week that took place. It's just mind-blowing, it's like something I've been trying to figure out for like 6 months, and all of a sudden, bam, there it is. It's crazy, but it's so true. And, it's like I say, as more of this stuff is coming to the fore and people are talking about it, and it's crazy, but man, that's what it all comes down to, you know?
Yeah, I think within the current like climate of everybody being so distrustful of one another, it's almost like the cream rising to the top. You're starting to see a lot of people conform to this idea of, hey, look, like my conscious thoughts can intervene against my negatively defaulted emotions, which affect my now negatively defaulted behaviors. But when I do consciously intervene with those negative emotions with a positive thought or with a hopeful thought, that can then therefore influence my emotions, which then therefore influences my actions, and therefore that can begin to compound itself. I call this the realignment when it comes to the true self, your maximum version of yourself, versus your actual self, where you're at currently in life. And with all the negativity that's being massively propagated at like unforeseen, unprecedented amounts before, you're seeing people either conform to that perpetual negative life cycle and belief system, or you're seeing people who are kind of like, man, this somewhat sucks, and they want to kind of explore a little bit further, something more positive. And so like, that's kind of where I think we're starting to see, as you're talking about, the acceptance of energies, vibrational frequency, law of attraction, quantum physics type stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's absolutely real, man. It's just like a radio station. You can't pick up FM channels on an AM network. You must be elevating yourself into a positive state of existence and consciousness in order to begin to see the positive opportunities and the states of positivity that are existing around you. It's, these are survival mechanisms built into the brain, the reticular activating system. It's like why when you buy a car or you're about to get a new car, specific model, you see it everywhere. Same thing goes for the context of your own personal belief systems. If you only believe and feel and see in negative terms, then you're only going to see the negative things that are abundant in your life. And the opposite is true for the positive. You elevate yourself, you get in that positive vibrational tone. And the best way, the easiest way that I've ever learned to do it is strictly through physical exercise. I'll force myself to do exercises in the middle of the day if I'm feeling a bit negative or worn down.
Yeah, that's the power of that, and that's something, I'll be honest, I've always struggled with, but, I used to force myself, especially after I had gotten sober, because just, that physical activity, it does something to you. That endorphins get firing, and, like there'd be days I'd just kind of be flat, and I would just go force myself to get on the treadmill, for even just 20 minutes. And it would just shift everything. I mean, there's things you can do, whether even meditation, it's interesting. If anyone out there, most of us seem to, after you say you eat a lunch and maybe it's a little heavier lunch or something, and you just feel kind of lagging later after that. It was crazy. I was in a men's group, and, it was like a 5-day deal. And after lunch, we would all do a meditation, just 20 minutes, just relaxing, breathing. And it blew me away how that shifted every day me out of that. And we'd go and have some pretty good lunches, and just that simple thing, how that shifted the way you feel. There's a lot of breathing exercise you can do, but that stuff is just, it's so crazy how, at least my perception is, that it's getting, like we're talking about, some of this stuff is getting very, very much more mainstream, but how that stuff is, so many people still look at that as like woo-woo or just kind of weird or whatever. I mean,
yeah,
there's so many things that are to our benefit to give us that power and that abilities, those God-given abilities we have, that we still, I don't think, have a clue just how powerful we are as beings.
Not at all, man. Not at all. Crazy. And, I mean, like, look, for anybody listening, like, dude, I was a special operations Marine who's been to combat, deployed to war like a bunch of times. Like, if anybody's thinking this is some foo-foo, lame stuff, it's going to be me. And it was me. And I always believed in the power of positivity, but I didn't necessarily believe in it with the science. I didn't understand the science behind it all. And now that I understand the science, because when you're put into these physically arduous and these emotionally arduous situations within the special operations community, whether it's walking for hundreds of miles with a heavy backpack, whether it's, losing somebody on the battlefield and having to compartmentalize those emotions and to continue to press on with the fight, that is when you really start to unlock through experience the capabilities of the human being. And that has always resonated somewhat with me. And when I was leaving the military, when I was getting out, when I was drinking and popping a bunch of MDMA, just trying to feel good about anything, a lot of survivor's guilt, a lot of depression, waking up on train tracks and just crazy shit.
Jeez.
What I started to ask myself was, how can I take like these powers that I've seen and I've witnessed in my life, and not just with myself, but with other people who've done some amazingly beautiful, heroic things. Like, how can I harness that power and that energy? And so I just opened up my mind to it. And by opening up my mind to the possibilities of it, was either I'm going to kill myself or I'm going to be open to this. And so because I decided to be open to it, I was able to then therefore accept it. I opened up that vibrational frequency of acceptance. And then I started to gravitate and attract into my life or see the things that were always there and always present. And so that's what really opened up it for me. And it's just been going deeper and deeper and deeper. It hasn't stopped, man. It's pretty, so for anybody who's looking or listening to this stuff, being like, man, that's just stupid, I'm telling you, man, it's real.
I mean, you're talking to two guys that are, alpha males, who, I don't know how many years ago for you, but for me, could have, 15, 20 years ago, I'd have thought this was nuts, even 10 years ago, some of it, not all of it, but some of it. But, speaking of special operators, I do want to talk a little bit about your experience there, but you're familiar with the ex-SEAL Michael J.𝗏 at all?
No.
He's older. He's actually older than me. I think he's around 60. Okay. I'll have to turn you on to some of his stuff, because the thing that's fascinating when I listen to him, he's got a pretty big podcast, Intuitive Warriors. He's written a book, but when he was in combat, he was a silver. Well, he was in the service for 23 years or 24. I don't know how many SEAL, and then like 11 as a CIA special, doing whatever he was doing there. But he would talk about, he talks always about putting out these love bubbles, and he would literally be sending out love even before missions and stuff to the, the HVT that they're going after or whatever. Wow. And he would have some of his teammates just think he was wacko, but there's several situations that he's talked about that, I mean, they should have died, and they get back to base or whatever. And his teammates are just going, what the hell you've been doing, Jake? Like, how did we, it's just fascinating stuff. And to hear somebody's perspective who's just been in crazy situations, who is using that power of, putting out that vibration of love, not only to protect them, but also just, in all sorts of situations. It's just fascinating to see a guy, that's got a background like you, and, who would think someone, like him would be talking about that love, and light. And that's really, to me, really, when you're in your dark places and doing these things that you and I both experienced and done, you're not even close to live vibration or a gratitude vibration, it's totally the opposite of that. But, you obviously were, Marines are the baddest dudes out there, in my opinion, and, to be a special operator and stuff. Give us, I mean, we don't need to talk much about your, combat and stuff, but as far as, I've listened to a lot of guys and read books from a lot of guys that, operated at levels like you. And I know the PTSD that goes on. I mean, it's incredible. Was that a big factor in, some of the things that you dealt with after you got out of the service? And then, you've talked a little bit about kind of how you were just thinking about, you're at a point in your life where you can either continue to be this way, or you can, maybe look into this stuff that seems a little bit strange, but there must be something to it. And you chose that path. Give us a little backstory on, kind of what you experienced, because I just want the audience to know that no matter how bad you think you've got it, there's always someone that has it worse. And I know, as a combat veteran and things that I'm sure, that you've seen that most of us couldn't even imagine, if you can go through the things that you've been through, be waking up on the train tracks, homeless and all that, you provide a lot of hope to anybody, no matter what their situation. So that's, if you could share some of that, that would be just incredible.
Yeah. And that's really why I started talking about a lot of this stuff to begin with, is because, man, if I could literally go from having the gun in my mouth and just passing out drunk, and then waking up with it still in my mouth and with my finger still on the trigger. Wow. If I could literally go from that moment, or the only reason I didn't pull it in that second was because I was thinking of how bad I felt for the crime scene cleanup crew, because I was using a really large caliber gun. And I was thinking how nasty it was going to be for them to clean up, and how I hope that they didn't, get traumatized by it. And then eventually I just kind of like passed
Isn't
out.
that interesting though, that you're thinking of others, and that's what kind of stopped you? I mean, that's
Somebody
great.
said that to me recently too.
Amazing.
But so if I can go from that into a life where it's just, dude, it's not a joke. It's not a facade where I literally wake up every single day at 3 o'clock, 2:30 a.m., 3 a.m. And I am just like, boom, I'm loving life. I love my life. I love life. It's such a beautiful thing. Anybody can. And I need to be able to push that message out there and help those people develop these systems, so that they too can also endure like the hardships, so that they could have a life of beauty and abundance. Because man, it'll make me cry if I start thinking about the fact that my kid could have never been here, and my wife, and I would never be here. But anyways, it's so I came up in the Marine Corps in a really interesting time. We were at war. And the Marine Corps never had a special operations component. It was always force reconnaissance, but there was the Marine Corps. It wasn't special operations command. And then they started it back in 06 or 07. And I was a part of the 10th class that the Marine Corps ever had for MARSOC, the Marine Special Operations Command. And we weren't even called Raiders yet at this time. We couldn't get the name back because the Marine Corps is just full of a bunch of egomaniacal douchebags who didn't want to give us the name from the World War II guys. It was just like ridiculous. But
So pathetic.
yeah, stupid. It's just dumb. Still, and it's so much worse now, dude. The Marine Corps leadership is an absolute joke. Military leadership is an absolute joke. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
For the other
you know better than me, but
Yeah,
I'm familiar with what's going on.
But I came up under some giants, man. Like the guys, I was on like the tail end of the special operations combatives. And so I went downrange, did some work, no doubt about it, right? But I wouldn't necessarily say that I had like PTSD from any traumatic experiences that occurred. Again, man, I got to do like some amazing things, man, like, and just some insane operations. But, it was never like, oh my God, that was so traumatic or close. There were some really, really sad moments in my career, but if anything, it was more the fact that I got into a little bit of trouble towards the end of my time in for some really frivolous stuff. I mean, dumb shit, dude. I put on my rank. I got promoted to a new rank. I put it on. I was going through Marine Corps Sniper School, which is like a very strict school, which I volunteered to go through, and I didn't even have to go through that. I could have went through the MARSOC Advanced Sniper course. I said, no, I want to go through that. And dude, I got in trouble because I didn't have an official promotion ceremony. And that little bit of bump in the road completely derailed my entire career as a Marine, as a special operator, lost my element, lost my team. Nobody talked to me anymore. And then I ended up kind of like just furthering the fire by pissing some people off, doing some other stuff because I felt like I was betrayed. And, we had a plane crash shortly after I got kicked off my team, where we break our teams down into two elements. So you got one team and two elements, and I was an element leader. Then I got thrown off, and then that plane crash was my element. So everybody died. And it was kind of like one of those things where
So you would have been on it if you wouldn't have got kicked off?
yeah, most likely, there's no way to confirm that, but
Right, but I mean,
right.
yeah.
And so that really, stuck with me. And if there's anything that still does make me feel, bad from time to time, it's that. But, it's just the chain of events that took place. It was so crazy, and how everything went down, that I can't help but just be grateful and respect those guys and their lives and their legacies by living the fullest every single day that I possibly can. And so when I was leaving the military, man, and then I had a lot of home problems, within the time that I was in, I lost 9 friends to overdosing or suicide. And my best friend, John, he died.
Really?
So the guy who literally saved me, yeah, ended up getting overprescribed pain pills, and ended up using, and couldn't break it. And and I was gone the whole time, right? Like I'm deployed, I'm still in the military. And that was like, I think that was really the thing that did it more than anything, where I was just like, dude, I'm fucking just like going crazy now. And drinking hardcore, just trying to basically kill myself, acting crazy. I guess I had like, traumatic brain injury from like repetitive blast explosions. And so not only am I like emotionally just perturbed, but like neurologically, I just wasn't all there. And, so I got enrolled in the traumatic brain injury clinic, outpatient program. And life was just wild and it was hectic. And I was just doing the most insane shit. I mean, firing guns off in residential communities, up in the air and in the ground, and crashing my motorbike, like, all over. It was just crazy shit. Anyway, so, I got out, and it was a lot of survivor's guilt, a lot of guilt in terms of the actions that I had, a lot of betrayal that I felt because I was willing to die for so many of these people. And like, they just turned their back on me so quickly. And this isn't meant to be like a pity party for Joe by any means, just to be clear. Like, I'm glad that I am where I am right now. And I don't care at all for the people who I feel like turn their back on me. I mean, it's like, whatever, it's like, it would be maniacal for me to feel sorry for myself, because it's built strength in adversity. The adversity has built the strength in me.
Yeah.
And so that is kind of really where it all kind of led down to, man, where I was laying on my floor in an apartment that I trashed, which was completely empty, but I trashed a few items that I had. And I was just ready to blast myself, man. I was so fucking mad at everybody and everything. And I was so mad at myself. I was just like, fuck this, dude. And then, I just woke up. Really great friend of mine was there, and he was there to pull the gun out of my mouth as I was waking up. And then another buddy of mine, James, who I grew up with, my childhood friend, had a really interesting conversation with me one day about God and having a relationship with God, and how, there's things going on in my life, and he feels like I just am sitting there relying on my own wisdom or lack thereof. And it's just like, man, I don't know if you believe in God or not, or a creator, but dude, I was just like, when he was talking, it was literally like it was God speaking to me through him. Yeah. And as anybody knows, it's like even Jesus wasn't a prophet in his hometown, right? Anytime you speak some sort of truth to your friends or your family, they're just kind of like, yeah, whatever, Joe, shut up.
That's so true.
And so it's like, man, when they say something and it like hits you like that, it's got to be like divine in some capacity. And man, I just didn't want to live like this. Like, I'm so tired of being tired and angry and depressed all the fucking time. And that's when I somehow got turned on to Ed Mylett, Earl Nightingale, Bob Proctor, John Assaraf, and
great.
Dude, like, oh my God, that in conjunction with my dude, and in conjunction with my newfound understanding of the brain from the traumatic brain injury clinic. And not only was I beginning to see the physiological changes in me, because I used to like get these random sweat attacks from the brain injury, a severe memory loss, like short-term memory loss from the brain injury. I stuttered quite a bit and couldn't find my words. So I swore a lot from the brain injury. And as I'm seeing these things dissipate and go away, and as I'm learning about the different, the quantum field with Dr. Joe Dispenza, I'm just like, it all just started to really fall together. And it wasn't easy by any means, because I lost my entire life savings. So it's like, once you start getting momentum, right, you just got to like fall right back down. So, I lost all the money I had nowhere to go, had nowhere to live as I left the military. That's how I ended up homeless, living out of a tent and my truck, and then a condo that was given to me for a little bit. But I just kept forcing myself to consciously intervene with my negative belief systems, which would change my emotions, even for the temporary at first. And I started working out in order to create the endocrine effect. When we work out, I think this is really important, and I'll kind of I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but
it's good stuff.
When we breathe in oxygen, it goes into the red blood cell, and the red blood cells bring it to the trillions of cells that compose our bodies. Like, it's insane how many cells compose our physical bodies. And that oxygen molecule gets dropped off in the cell, and that oxygen molecule gets digested into the mitochondria of the cell. And the mitochondria metabolizes that oxygen molecule and creates ATP. That is the energy, the life force that we emit. It is literally the vibrational frequency that we emit. And so when we're working out, and we are taking in a lot of oxygen and we're metabolizing a lot of oxygen, we're pushing out that carbon dioxide, what's happening is we are increasing the amplitude of the amount of energy being metabolized by our cells at the most minuscule level possible. And so the more energy that we're putting out, then the more higher of a vibrational frequency that we happen to be operating on. And in conjunction with that, our body starts releasing certain neurochemicals in the bloodstream that make us feel good. That's why working out feels so good, is because you are literally like little alternators in your body that comprise your entire physical existence. They're just generating energy and energy and energy, which brings you further and further and further up out of that depressive state. And so, all of this stuff really just started to build momentum. I'm losing all my money, but I'm staying positive and I'm seeking opportunities. I lost all my money again. Dude, high risk option stock trading is just not for me. I do great and then I do horrible.
Wow.
But that's happened to me like 4 times since I got out, and each and every time, just boom, right back, right back, right. And my point to all this is that it's never going to be a simple route. You don't want it to be a simple route. You must have adversity. You must deal with pain in order to create strength. And so anytime that you're ever going through a painful experience, even if it's the most painful experience, like drug addiction, hardcore wanting to just forget everything, dude, you must be sober. You must face the fucking music and just cry it out, man. And just reprogram yourself to not just only see the good in life, because that's just kind of a little too much for me, but to seriously only ingest good, positive information, good, positive food, good, positive water. That's everything you ingest is what is allowing you to create something within. And then therefore you could put out into the world, because you can never receive back what you don't put out into the world. The farmer does not just get crops. The farmer must plant the seed.
That is powerful. And that is so true. In fact, gal I had on just episode before this one, Danielle Matthews, she had a massive brain injury from a head-on collision. And same thing, everything you talked about, she's done and experienced. Joe Dispenza name came up too. So because of that, I'm going to make sure to find the YouTube link of his story, because it is incredible. And I mean, if anyone listening doesn't think this stuff is real, true, I mean, Joe's proven it, not only with his story, but many times over since, and the things he's doing is just fascinating, incredible. In fact, I hope to attend one of his events someday, because it's just incredible stuff that we can do. The powers we have are just hard to even comprehend.
Guy literally heals his own back walking out of the hospital after everybody's telling him he needs spinal fusion. I mean, that's like
2 rods down his back. Yeah.
Dude, that's where I'm.
It's fascinating. I mean, the power of the mind is how that's what he used to cure himself, basically within 3 weeks. It's just nuts.
Yeah, some crazy timeline.
Crazy. Well, man, that's fascinating stuff, but it's just so true. So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now. You've got, I know what is your website? SouthernCross.company. Is that correct?
Yeah, SouthernCross.company is, so my mission in life is to help people be safe against violence and violent crime. And I believe that is done through empowering the individual with the skills of lethality. When people who are capable of great lethality are capable of preserving great peace, not only within the self, but within society. So security and safety are the first most primary needs any living creature must have. You can't have food or water or love or a family or shelter if you don't have safety and security. And we've become so codependent within American society on the construct of our amazingly luxurious and great nation that people think it's like weird to know how to use a gun, or weird to know how to like defend yourself with lethality. Like, that's not weird. It's weird that we don't think that way. And that's it, man, is I want to teach people how they can defend themselves and their loved ones in the worst situations possible, because when you know how to handle those situations, you feel more relaxed, you enjoy life more, you're much more present, you're not paranoid, you're more trusting of people, because you know if they try some crazy stuff that you have the ability and the skills and the awareness to defend yourself against it. And so that itself has morphed into, so Southern Cross is really a workplace violence prevention more than anything, where I work with corporations to teach them how to create value within their staff in a less likely violent activity type of a workplace, lower tensions. And I also have started individual coaching programs now where I'm teaching people how to develop proper nutrition, proper fitness, proper mindset. And then we create the skill sets on top of that, where if you want to get licensed in some firearms training, yeah, we do NRA, we do USCCA training, but really also to help people out with starting businesses, like veterans who transition out of the military, so they don't make the same mistakes that I make, because I made a lot. And then even more than that, anybody who needs to get a certain certification within their current career path, man, we have access to literally 100 and some different certification pipelines. If you work in the hazardous material industry, if you work in a firefighting rescue industry, if you work in a corporate CPA, insurance. So we're really just trying to help people accelerate their lives while helping them increase their awareness and lethality.
That's fantastic. I think both you and I feel the same way. For people out there are struggling, the one thing that used to get in my way all the time, I don't know about you, Joe, you can speak for yourself, but when you're trying to get to where you want to go, the best way to get there is to find someone that's already been there, to shorten the path. And for me, pride just always used to get in the way. I was too proud to ask. But man, if you just ask, there's so many people out there in this world. I'm one, Joe's one. Just reach out. Don't be afraid, because people like to help other people. And majority of people are good people.
That's so true. It's so true what you just said right there. The majority of people are good people, but we subconsciously don't think that anymore because of all the negative news propagation.
That's right. So true. Well, where can people find you, and how can people connect with you, Joe?
Yeah, biggest thing right now, I started doing the Instagram game. So Joseph_Malone_official, putting out safety tips and all the science behind cultivating a positive mindset, positive life and health. And then southerncross.company is the website for anybody who is interested in sort of speaking engagement or corporate workplace violence prevention program. Very interactive, very fun. That's the key here, is workplace violence prevention training needs to be fun. Yeah. It's not a PowerPoint about statistics. That's more like a violence increase, training. Okay. So it's cool. It's really fun. I have a great time doing it. And if anybody's interested, they could always reach out to me.
Well, fantastic, man. I really appreciate your time, folks. If you find value in this episode and this podcast, please jump over to Apple and give us a 5-star written review. That'll help the algorithm populate this episode so that people can find it. And appreciate you tuning in. And again, Joe, man, appreciate your time. Appreciate what you're doing, and you're just inspiration. I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You bet. Talk to you again. Thanks.